Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today, I'm joined by Marin. Marin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. We were just talking earlier. Marin has much better weather than I do. I'm out in Utah, and I was freezing today. So I'm also pretty much jealous of anywhere that is not Utah at the moment. It's beautiful, but it is frigid. But Marin, thanks again for taking the time. Before we dive into the subject today, could you just give us a little bit of a background in your career, what you love about in marketing, where your passions are, and then we'll kind of dive into it for the day.
I'm a senior director of marketing here at Pi Insurance. Prior to here, I've had roughly 18, 20 years of content experience. Started off as a blogger, was a YouTuber, have built content programs for startups to unicorns. I spent about 5+ years at Microsoft building out global content programs. I now lead content, paid, social, web, lifecycle, and really am passionate about using content as a central pillar for these continual storytelling and marketing motions. Have really had my entire career in content. I remember when it was this odd concept you'd have to sell internally, and I've seen how it's shifted now where basically every business understands the value of content. I'm interested now because I think we're in this generational shift of not only that buy-in and understanding of the value of content, but this wave of just cool AI tools that have taken the cost of production down to almost zero. But now that means the bar has raised for quality and what you need to do to stand out from the crowd. And then, as you mentioned, outside of work, I'm here in San Diego, and we do have amazing weather. So I enjoy that.
I love it. I love it. Rub it in anytime you want. That it makes me feel good. So today what we're going to talk about is really when you're looking at content, so often we focus on this bottom of the funnel content, the content that is going to sell. It's easier to track. There's an ROI. Before the show, we were talking and you brought up some really interesting points. Why should we maybe balance this a little bit more and really be mindful of the top of the funnel and some of the objectives there as opposed to the bottom of the funnel? Why should we be really mindful of that process when you're looking at content?
Yeah. So when we talked earlier, you definitely have to have that sales content done and locked, right? Make sure you have your value props in there. It's clean, how you stand out from the crowd, all that kind of thing. But the reality is your audience, 1%, maybe 5%, if you're lucky, is actually ready to buy or will be close to being able to buy. So the rest of that audience or your potential audience is still out there. And if you can create really compelling, useful, valuable content for them, you can get to the top of their mind space, their feeds, their email boxes, inboxes, so that when they are ready to start buying, they'll think of you. I think there was a survey by Demand Gen Report said that like 50 plus or about 50% of software buyers already read 3 to 5 pieces of content before they start a sales process or try to book a demo. So they're already doing this process without you outside of your just direct sales material. So you have to meet them where they are with your content.
So when you're talking about the top of funnel content, some of that introduction content before people know you, how do you maintain, this standard of excellence? How do you focus on value? There's so much content out there, like you mentioned. I mean, to use AI, it can take a matter of seconds, and you could have hundreds of articles. How do you stand out? How do you judge if your content is good enough to actually kind of stand out for your audience, for the 95, 99% that are actually going to engage with this kind of content?
So the standard I try to hold myself and my team to is, can you create content that people would be willing to pay for? Now they're not going to be they're not going to pay for this, but that's the bar that we try to keep. So if you think about it, what kind of content do people pay for? They pay for Netflix because it's entertaining and really fun, or they'll pay for business subscription news because it helps them make money, or they'll pay for online courses because it helps them achieve more with whatever they're trying to do. It's hard to always keep to that standard, but that's what I try to drive my team and myself to hold to that standard when we're creating content.
So when you're looking at creating content at the top of the funnel, how are you coming up with the ideas? The topics, the subjects, the formats. How are you figuring out what your audience even cares about enough that they would spend the time away from a Netflix that they do pay for? How do you figure out what to create that would actually provide enough value that they'll take the time?
Well, I think there's a mix of quantitative, qualitative. I'm still an SEO keyword person. I think that's a good starting point. Obviously, researching all of the trends, short form video, of course, is how people like to consume a lot of content. But key thing is you ask them. You ask your audience either directly through interviews, working with your sales team or your customer support team, and take those qualitative insights and then just try to map to them. Oftentimes when I've built out multiple B2B content programs for SaaS companies, and the best ideas come from those initial meetings with my salespeople and ask them, what are your objections? What are the questions you get asked the most? And that is like your initial roadmap. Again, that's more for like the down funnel stuff, but just ask your audience what they want. And more often than not, they will tell you.
I love that. Something I've also seen is if you ask them, hey, what was the last article you can remember? Because they read a ton, but if they can actually remember it, there was something that stuck in their mind. And if you get those insights, you can translate that into something really actually quite powerful. When you're looking at all of this content, what kind of a mix on your time do you feel like is appropriate to spend top, middle, bottom? Is it more of a needs base, or do you have a rule of thumb to say 50% time allocation? If you're on a team or recommending or talking to, teams, B2B marketing teams, what would your recommendations be for time split or time to spend on content?
I don't typically have a percentage or rule of thumb. It's mostly where are the fires. So if you don't have that bottom of the funnel sales content, things that has a more easily trackable ROI, definitely start there, build that foundation out, and then start moving up as much as you possibly can. And then as you evolve as an org and start to understand where those needs and those gaps are, you can allocate your time and resources accordingly.
I love it. Now, you explained your current responsibilities and everything you're over, and you talked about having kind of content as the central pillar of everything you do. How does that functionally work? If you're looking inside your organization and your systems, if you create pillar content, how are you using the various channels to distribute that content? Are you repurposing in specific ways? Do you have different ways of doing that? How do you kind of get the mileage out of the core tenet of content with the various channels that you oversee?
So initially, it would be you build this big piece of core content, whether it's an asset, an ebook, a resource, and then you repurpose it and slice and dice it for the distribution channel you want to use, optimize it for email, for organic social, for webinar, et cetera, et cetera. The most exciting thing that I've learned as a content professional, now that I've also had some experience managing these other channels, is how you can use those channels to impact the content itself and kind of flip that distribution. So I think the most powerful of that is on social, where obviously TikTok short form video is just wildly successful and engaging. people like it. I like it. The growth of TikTok and all these things are evidence of that. So instead of, hey, starting with this big block of ebook and then find a way to turn it into short form video, you can start with the short form video and then work your way backwards. Similar with what's working on email, that actually helps to build that core content to make it be more impactful and powerful and to stand out on those distribution channels. And that's something that I've only really been able to do over the last few years. I had the very structured, this is the content, hand it over to these different silos and teams. They'll chop it up appropriately. But having it that holistic piece and using those distribution channels to inform the content just makes it even better and helps it be more relevant to the audience.
I love that. I haven't heard that strategy before, and I think it's absolutely genius. I think all too often we're shooting in the dark when we say, maybe it's an SEO keyword or it's something, but we're saying, okay, here's the topic, and then let's go distribute. But the audience may not respond, and we just chalk it up as a loss and move on to the next one. But I love how much data you're collecting on the front end. And I think it's really interesting that you're using TikTok for that as well, because TikTok is one of the few engines where, at least from my understanding, the algorithm favors content over creators, right? If you're on YouTube or Twitter or X or whatever it is now, all that kind of stuff, the creator, regardless of the kind of content, they get that natural boost through their audience. TikTok, on the other hand, tends to give almost all content the same opportunity, regardless if it's a brand new channel or creator or things like that. So you really do have this immediate, brand new account. Here's an idea. You have that opportunity to say, hey, does it resonate? Because you don't have to work on building a following initially. Have you seen similar results with that? Has that helped out at all?
Yeah, on TikTok, it's very interesting because I think what you're saying is true. It is one of the few content-led ones where even if you don't have a giant following, you still have a chance if you can make great content. Now, of course, there are challenges with their algorithm that we probably don't need to get into here. But I do love that approach there. You can still go viral, quote unquote, as a single person with a new account yesterday. And if this is just awesome, resonant content, then it can go to 100 million people. And that is very rare in this, where marketers have ruined basically every channel. So it's interesting to see that.
I love it. Well, as promised, the time goes by quick. Marin, thank you. There's so many good insights. I love the understanding that, focus on where the majority of your audience. I've never looked at it as the 95 or 99% of your audience. Tailor your content to them. I love really the unique approach of promotion first content to really drive the pillar pieces and things like that. So this has been super informative. Thank you for the time today. I appreciate it. Really good insights.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Love it. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation and connect with you online, how can they do that? What's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn with Marin Perez or on X at Marin Perez.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for the time today. Appreciate the insights and enjoy that warm weather for us.
Will do. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.